low-fat yogurt. After primping themselves for a formal evening out, the yogurt cows sashay past the paparazzi into the milking complex. Yesterday, Paco Bell's Canyon D. Today, the Blue Danube Waltz, the particular favorite of the blueberry cow. One thing is clear, Robert's yogurt cows are the product of good breeding and active culture.
Roberts, how do you make it taste so good?
This is CNN.
Is Boris Yeltsin crying wolf when he warns of revolt in Russia? Are the Mideast peace talks stalled while Israel prepares for elections? Is the Bush administration once again out to get Saddam Hussein? Welcome to Newsmaker Saturday in Washington. I'm Charles Bierbauer. Those questions for U.S. Secretary of State James Baker.
From Washington, this is Newsmaker Saturday with Charles Bierbauer.
Secretary of State Baker boards his plane again Sunday for some new countries: Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and on to Russia for new arms control talks.
Distinct possibility in our view that all such tactical nuclear weapons will be in the Russian Republic by July 1.
More U.S. aid will arrive in Russia with Baker, as Russian President Boris Yeltsin grimly warns that without help, his country will collapse back into dictatorship. By the time Baker returns to Washington, he'll have to refocus on the Middle East peace talks.
I hope they're going to be inclined to come back here to Washington for additional bilateral discussions toward the end of this month.
All the old problems remain, plus June elections in Israel. Meanwhile, new CIA Director Bob Gates is traveling the Mideast. U.S. officials say Gates is not conjuring covert schemes to overthrow Iraq's Saddam Hussein, though it's plain his continued control in Baghdad irritates the Bush administration.
We think that Iraq is continuing to conceal the remains of its weapons of mass destruction programs. We are concerned about possible future efforts by Iraq to rebuild those programs.
A coup before November would be welcome at the White House.
Well, I've said I'd like to see him out of there. I just leave it right there.
Joining me to question Secretary of State Baker is Ralph Begleiter, CNN's World Affairs correspondent. Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us. The question about Iraq and Saddam Hussein does not seem to go away. There are reports today in the Los Angeles Times that the CIA has been authorized a $30 million program to covertly weaken and overthrow Saddam Hussein. One, is that accurate?
Well, if it involves covert activity, of course I wouldn't talk to you about it on this program, but there have been a lot of reports from time to time that have not been accurate, and I just would refer you to official statements in terms of what the policy approach is.
Do you have any reason to think that Saddam Hussein is now internally weakened, that there might be something brewing over there to try and overthrow him internally?
Well, I think when you mean weakened, he is considerably weaker, of course, than he was before he marched into Kuwait, and that's why we take great pleasure in the fact that we accomplished our war aims. Let's remember that the removal of Saddam Hussein was never a war aim of the coalition, and he is considerably weaker today, of course, than he was before that event, and considerably weaker in our opinion, than he has been at other times in the aftermath of that event.
Is there a new effort by the administration to engage in psychological warfare to get Saddam?
No, there's a lot of interest and speculation and hype going on out there. I think in the press there is a great deal of interest on the part of the administration in seeing Iraq and Saddam Hussein adhere to and comply with the solemn resolutions of the United Nations Security Council. And when those are not complied with, there is a certain degree of let me put it mildly, by saying disappointment on the part of members of the coalition. And we want those resolutions complied with. As President Bush said just the other day, if he were no longer in power, the United States, and I'm sure many of our other coalition allies, would be then in a position to move toward better relations with Iraq and whoever the successor government of Iraq was.
Should there be UN military action again against Saddam Hussein?
Well, that's a very speculative question.
I know, that's why we're asking.
Well, yesterday they denied UN inspectors admission to a suspect site. And for a period of time there, it looked like the Iraqis were reverting to their old cheat and retreat policy. They ultimately let the inspectors come in, and so the problem was resolved in a manner consistent with implementation of the UN resolutions, and we want to see those resolutions implemented.
Mr. Secretary, this is an election year. Would it be politically risky to embroil U.S. troops in Iraq in a very uncertain circumstances?
I don't know the answer to that question, but that would not be the determining factor. If the president was faced with such a decision, he'd make his decision on the basis of what he thought was right and appropriate and proper.
But there's no need to do that at this point.
Well, you're getting into hypothetical questions. I'm not.
No, it's not entirely hypothetical. The premise is you'd like to see Saddam Hussein fall, but you'd like that to happen as a fact of things happening within Iraq rather than something that you are a catalyst for.
Well, we want to be a catalyst for strict observation of the United Nations Security Council resolutions. And as we've said many, many times, no one would shed any tears if there was a change of government over there, and that would permit the United States and other nations to approach Iraq in a more normal way.
Mr. Secretary, here's something that isn't hypothetical. You met with the Israeli ambassador this week to try to work out an arrangement on loan guarantees and settlements. Did your negotiations result in an agreement that will in any way limit Israeli settlements?
No, we have not reached any agreement. We've agreed on a few things. There's still some rather significant issues that are in disagreement. It is the position of the United States that if we are going to talk about additional assistance over and above the $3 to $4 billion that we provide for Israel every year, then we ought to do it on terms that are consistent with U.S. policy principles and U.S. policy goals.
Are the Israelis going to have to stop building new settlements, and will there have to be a limit on ones that are already under construction?
Well, I'd prefer to conduct that negotiation with them privately than to conduct it publicly, but you know what the American position is, the policy position of the United States with respect to settlements. We think they are obstacles to peace. And we've felt that way for 25 plus years, ever since 1967. And as I say, if the American people are going to be called upon to make additional assistance available, it's only appropriate, we think, that it be done so based on U.S. policy positions.
But does that policy, to come back to Ralph's question, does that policy draw the line at new settlements, or does it draw the line at the completion of settlements that have already been started?
What the policy position is that settlements themselves are an obstacle to peace. And we have, as I say, since 1967, told the Israelis that it is the view of every administration, Republican and Democrat alike, that they should stop settlement activity. That is our policy position.
Other obstacles for peace, the Israelis have elections scheduled. You've got another round of the Mideast peace talks anticipated at the end of this month. Can you really make progress until those elections are out of the way?
Well, I take a great deal of comfort from the words of Prime Minister Shamir when he says we're committed to the peace process and we're going to move forward with it, notwithstanding the fact that we're moving into elections. I hope that turns out to be the case. We certainly have no reason to disbelieve his statements in that regard. And I don't think the elections in and of themselves, I certainly hope not, the elections in and of themselves will abort the peace process.
Coming back real briefly to the settlements question, if the agreement you ultimately reach with the Israelis allows the construction of any part of new settlements, those still under construction, if you allow that kind of construction, aren't you violating what you just said, which is U.S. policy for 25
I don't think
years?
you are if such an agreement were coupled with an understanding or requirement that new construction activity would stop, and anything that was completed would in effect have to be accounted for dollar from other assistance or from assistance to Israel.
Mr. Secretary, we need to take a break. I'd like to ask you about your trip to Russia and points east when we come back. Stay with us, please.
Tonight, the Japanese Prime Minister fires a second round at American workers, and candidate Clinton's problems turn from love to war on CNN's Capital Gang, 7 Eastern tonight.
As Nancy Walsh saves for her son's education, her savings and those of millions like her are invested in business. When business grows, our nation prospers and becomes more competitive in the world, which could open up a world of opportunities. And who will be there seeking out those opportunities for you and Nancy Walsh? Merrill Lynch. We're bullish on the future.
Usually, when you send flowers out of town, you give the order to somebody who takes a cut. Then he passes the order to somebody else who takes a cut. But now there's Flowers Direct that actually lets you speak to a florist in the town where you're sending the flowers. Flowers Direct. All we cut is the middleman. Call Flowers Direct now, 1-800-621-2121.
Ricola, the all-natural herb cough drop imported from Switzerland. Ricola has been soothing throats and relieving coughs naturally for over 60 years.
TBS presents 3 nights of television dedicated to solving our most critical environmental challenges. The Save the Earth specials. Beginning Sunday night, February 23rd on TBS.
On Newsmaker Saturday in Washington, I'm Charles Bierbauer with Secretary of State James Baker. Let's turn to the events in what used to be the Soviet Union, where you are headed to several of those new countries. First, Mr. Yeltsin, he has stated this week in Paris that unless more assistance is coming, the red shirts and the brown shirts will turn out in the street and there will be revolt. This almost sounds like he's saying, you've got to help us or else. It's bordering on blackmail.
Well, I don't think that's certainly not the way we interpret it, and we had some very good discussions with President Yeltsin when he was here visiting President Bush at Camp David. I expect to have further meetings with him during the course of this trip toward the end of it. We have provided in excess of $5 billion in assistance to the former Soviet Union in one form or another. Some of that was provided before President Yeltsin acceded to power. He's making the point, I think, that we make quite frequently, and that is that we spent trillions and trillions of dollars to win the Cold War, and we therefore ought to be willing to invest something far, far less than that in winning the peace. It would not be to the advantage of the United States and the free world, for that matter, if there was a return to totalitarianism in Russia or in the former republics of the former Soviet Union.
But is he crying wolf? Is the situation in your assessment not as dire as he makes it?
I think the situation is very difficult, Charles. You've got to remember that what they're trying to do has never been done before. They're trying to convert a system that for 70 years has been going in this direction, immediately, quickly turn it around and run it in exactly the opposite direction, move from a totally command and control economy to a free market economy. It's very difficult. There's no model. It's never been done before. And we ought to be, and I think we are, and have been, willing to do what we can to assist. And we've been very helpful, and will continue to be on the humanitarian front. That is providing food and medicines and things like that so that to give the people sustenance while they go through these difficult times.
Mr. Secretary, here's a chance to ask you a little bit about the underpinnings of that policy. The United States, you said, gave about $5 billion to the people of the former Soviet Union. Population almost 300 million people. The United States gives nearly $7 billion to 2 countries in the Middle East with a population of about 60 million people. No natural resources of any use really to the West. The former Soviet Union has massive oil, natural gas, other resources that could be of use to the West, and has agreed to turn its nuclear weapons away from the United States and so on. Isn't there something wrong with that picture?
No, I don't think so, Ralph, because these things cannot, and you should not expect them to happen overnight. Remember that for 40 years we have been engaged in a Cold War with the former Soviet Union. And a part of that East-West dimension was the contest for influence in the Middle East. That accounts, in part, only in part, but in part for our Middle East assistance policy with Israel and with Egypt. Much of our assistance to Israel, of course, is because she is the only democracy in the region. She is a strong ally of the United States, and we want to and will maintain our absolute and total commitment to the preservation of her security. On the other hand, we were not providing anything by way of assistance to the former Soviet Union as recently as 6 or 7 or 8 months ago. Why? Because they were an enemy, and we were engaged in a very hot, cold war with them. So,
but it's a new world order, as President Bush keeps saying.
That's right, and look what's happening. We are the United States providing $5 billion in assistance to the former Soviet Union, and the ship is turning. But you can't expect it just to happen all overnight.
You're also going to talk about arms control, further proposals from both sides about cutting strategic nuclear weapons. Mr. Yeltsin says, hey, let's go down to 2,500 warheads. Mr. Bush is somewhere around 4,500. Why not go to 2,500?
Well, the real question is not so much just cutting for cutting's sake. What we really ought to seek to do, and what the President's very forthcoming proposal in his State of the Union message does do, is seek to deal with those weapons that are the most destabilizing. That is the MIRVed ICBMs. So it's not just, we should not look at this just in terms of numbers. There are many, many other factors that are important, and the destabilizing nature of the reductions is the most important thing. The President's initiative would take us down to a level 50% below the level at which we would be in the aftermath of the recently negotiated START agreement. So that's a fairly dramatic step. We ought to take these things in stages and in steps. We will be engaging with the Russians and other nuclear states during the course of this trip, and let's see what happens.
At the same time, there's been a suggestion that perhaps the French, the British, the Chinese could reduce their nuclear weapons as well. They all seem to be saying no. Why should they be excluded? Why not draw them in?
Well, at some point, it's very entirely possible that they will become a part of the process. I noted some statements moving in that direction, or generally to that effect, coming out of the Yeltsin-Mitterrand meetings here recently in France. The level of their nuclear weapons is so much less than the level of the United States and former Soviet Union that I think they might enter the process at a later stage.
Mr. Secretary, you've talked about the former Soviet Union turning around, becoming a new entity in effect. Is Japan turning out to substitute for the former Soviet Union as the United States' evil empire? Are Americans looking at Japan as the enemy now?
I don't believe so. There are certainly tensions in the U.S.-Japan relationship. These, as a matter of substance, have been there for some time, the economic and trade tensions. The job that both countries have, in my view, is to properly manage those tensions. The U.S.-Japan security relationship is very firm and very important to peace and stability in Southeast Asia. It has recently been reaffirmed. And I think that as we see the trade deficit that we have with Japan decline, and it has declined in recent years, we'll be able to properly manage these economic and trade tensions. We are, after all, the two largest economies in the world. We have a great deal of interest on both sides in working together and in cooperating.
Well, if I could pick up on Ralph's question, there was a commentary in a newspaper the other day under the headline, "Who will we root against now?" Based on a sporting analogy, but in the absence of a Soviet Union. And is there something in the national psyche that needs someone to
Well, I don't know. Maybe so, but without giving validity to that principle or that article, let me say there are, we think, four major challenges out there in the post-Cold War world. One of them are the challenges presented by the crumbling of communism, and you still have a lot of that, and there's still states in transition from communism, or still states that cling to it. You've got the questions of regional conflicts and proliferation that are out there that are very, very important. You've got these international economics questions that we need to deal with that are represented in the U.S.-Japan relationship. And you've got a whole host of major transnational questions like the environment and the movement of people, refugees, migration, religious movements, and things, narcotics, terrorism. These are the things that we ought to now be focusing on and that we are beginning to focus on.
Mr. Secretary, you got a letter this week from China about missile proliferation, speaking of proliferation. Do the Chinese promises now satisfy the United States?
We're still in the process of reviewing the letter and engaging with the Chinese, and when we have a response, we'll let you know.
You are going to be watching from a distance this year as a political campaign takes place in the United States. You're noted for your political skills and for your involvement in President Bush's last campaign. Are you going to be able to resist jumping in and helping your good friend of 35 years if he gets in trouble during the campaign?
Well, that's where we're not at that point, are we? I told
you may not be able to resist.
I told somebody yesterday that I do not get the nightly. They were asking me. Somebody asked me a question about who the Democratic nominee would be, who did I think it might be. I said, look, I no longer get the nightly tracking polls, and I don't miss it. And that's the way I'd leave it.
Let me ask you one quick question, though, about the '88 campaign. The Vice President's wife, Marilyn Quayle, has suggested that you may have mishandled her husband and created some of his problems. Any response?
No.
No comment.
No comment.
Pretty frosty.
Do you think he was badly handled in '88?
I don't have any comment on that.
There were accusations that, for example, that you prevented or didn't assist Dan Quayle even get to the moment at which he was going to be, his name was going to be announced.
I don't have any comment on that.
Well, on that political note, sir, I thank you for being with us and wish you
Thank
good
you,
luck
Charles.
on your trip to all those new countries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you as well, Ralph Begleiter. I'll be back in a moment with a final word on the former Soviet Union. Stay with us.
Did you overpay your taxes last year? If you have a personal computer, you can avoid making the same mistake again. Last year, over 6 million income tax returns were prepared using TurboTax, America's #1 tax software. This year, TurboTax is so easy to use that anyone can prepare their taxes on a computer quickly and accurately. Simply gather your records, and TurboTax does the rest. TurboTax shows you where to enter each receipt, highlights tax savings, flags errors, then calculates and prints IRS-approved forms. Just sign and mail. TurboTax is available for IBM-compatible Windows and Macintosh computers. Call now and try TurboTax absolutely free for 30 days. You pay just $8.50 for Federal Express standard overnight service. If you don't like it, return it and owe nothing. If you do like it, keep it, and we'll bill your credit card only $59.95.
So call 1-800-426-0400. This year, let TurboTax help you save money on your taxes. For your free trial copy, call 1-800-426-0400.
Napoleon, what was your hand in the jacket? People are talking.
Josephine, my briefs are killing me.
Oh, I have just the thing.
Fruit of the loom.
Totally comfortable.
Hey, c'est magnifique, eh?
How about that waistband?
It's super comfortable, me, oui.
And that soft pre-shrunk cotton?
Feels great. Down to the skin.
Ooh la la.
For classic comfort, pick Fruit of the Loom briefs.
No, leave the hat on.
Because sometimes the day ends and the pain doesn't, we've created Tylenol PM. It's more than relief. It's relief for those times when you can't sleep. Tylenol PM has extra-strength Tylenol pain reliever to help stop your nighttime aches and pains, plus a gentle ingredient to help you sleep. So you can wake up refreshed in the morning. From the name you trust comes Tylenol PM, so you can rest easy.
Who will we root against now? That headline in the Wall Street Journal this week brought home a dilemma, not just to assuage the national psyche that seems to need someone to dislike, but to help us through the linguistic gap created by the fall of communism. Watch the upcoming Winter Olympics, and those familiar letters, CCCP, it's really USSR in Russian, won't be emblazoned on the hockey shirts. We've not yet found a handy shorthand for what remains. CIS does not ring well. You can't call it Russia at all. And for television, at least, it takes too long to name them all. Over at the State Department, they're using FSU for former Soviet Union. We know where you're going, Mr. Secretary, but we sure don't know what to call it. If you've got any good ideas, tell us or the State Department. Tomorrow on Newsmaker Sunday, the economy. Is it really as bad as we think? 3 leading economists will give their views. That's Newsmaker Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern here on CNN. For Newsmaker Saturday, thanks for joining us. In Washington, I'm Charles Bierbauer.
For a transcript of Newsmaker Saturday with Charles Bierbauer, send $4 to Newsmaker Saturday Transcripts, Journal Graphics, 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203, or call 1-303-831-9000. Your comments may be sent to the same address.
Risk. As hard as it is to live with, it's impossible to live without. At Merrill Lynch, we know that risk can be dealt with. It can be managed. It can even be turned to your advantage. To do that, you need a partner. A partner who understands it and can help you turn a world of risk into a world of opportunity. Merrill Lynch. We're bullish on the future.
My dad had ulcers. So when my stomach started acting up, I was afraid to go to the doctor. But the pain wouldn't go away, so I went. Was I relieved when my doctor said Mylanta? He said it was indigestion, not an ulcer. And my kind of indigestion called for a strong medicine.
Mylanta is strong medicine, strongly recommended. In fact, Mylanta is the antacid doctors recommend most.
My doctor said Mylanta.
On CNN tomorrow, is the economy really as bad as you think? Why, the answer might be no on Newsmaker Sunday. Then on Inside Business, massive layoffs in the U.S., but the recession may not be to blame. All tomorrow on CNN.
Hi, everybody. Important to keep you updated on the nation's weather, and here's Steve Kosch. He has the latest. Hi, Steve.
Hi, everyone. Here's a look at our forecast map for Saturday afternoon. The lake effect snows will continue to plague the areas just to the lee of the lakes, portions of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. Look for some heavy snow squalls there. Some of the heaviest snow squalls we've seen in north-central sections of Indiana should be ending by this afternoon. Very blustery conditions, very cold, too, throughout most of the eastern half of the country. Cloudy skies throughout most of California, rain northern California into Oregon. During the day on Sunday, that will spread throughout the entire state of California. Look at the forecast high temperatures today. Some very cold readings up to the north and around the Great Lakes. Mild readings elsewhere. Here's some forecasts now for a few cities. The news continues here on CNN. Have a great weekend.
Indeed it does. Top stories in Health Week coming up. Stay with us.
I've been eating A.E. cottage cheese for years. Some people think it's just for diets, but I'm smarter than that. Mommy and Daddy serve it with lots of foods that I can't even pronounce. But I like it right out of the carton. And in case you didn't know, the small curds were made in small cottages, and the large curds were made in large cottages.
A.E. Cottage Cheese. It's not just for diets anymore.
I knew that.
Here's some free advice from a car dealer. Do not buy a new car until you check out the automotive industry's best-kept secret, Subaru. Thanks for watching.
So, learned anything today?
Carl Vogel is a plumber.
I don't know.
In the town of Carrollton, Georgia.
We learned about the wall coming down.
A town where TCI recently introduced cable television to the high school.
Dad?
At first, Carl didn't understand what cable television had to do with education.
I think maybe I might want to go to college.
But if you ask him today,
You think that'll be okay?
Yeah.
he'd say it's a change for the better.
I think maybe that'll be okay.
Coach Rudy Washington said that the Drake fans helped the Bulldogs beat the Wichita State Shockers last week. This Saturday, the Bulldogs will do battle with conference rival, the Creighton Blue Jays. And we could use a little help from our loyal fans. So, come on out and fill Veterans Auditorium with your voices as our young Bulldogs do battle with the Creighton Blue Jays this Saturday at 7:05 p.m. at Vets Auditorium. You've got to be inside bets to see all the action. Call the Drake Ticket Office today.
If you're the kind of person who'd rather tune an engine than eat, haven't we got a machine for you? And in the hands of the right mechanic, it'll blow the doors off anything. Aim high, Air Force.
This is CNN.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mollie McCoy. Health Week coming up. First, a look at the hour's top stories. After a lunch break, the rape trial of Mike Tyson has resumed in Indianapolis. Mike Tyson returned to the witness stand this morning. This time, he was grilled by the prosecutor. CNN's Jeff Block has the story.
It was, by some accounts, a good or at least not a bad performance for Mike Tyson. There was no knockout punch from prosecutor Greg Garrison. There were, however, some good body blows. The prosecutor pointing out inconsistencies between the story that Mike Tyson told jurors yesterday and the story that he told the grand jury this past summer. He never said then, for example, that he had made a blatant sexual overture to the woman, as he told jurors yesterday. He said earlier in the grand jury testimony that the woman had very short pink hot pants on, with her thighs showing that night. As it turns out, the woman, it seems, was wearing a yellow outfit with very long shorts. Cross-examination also revealed that Tyson's bodyguard had told authorities that he was outside the door where the alleged attack took place the whole time. Earlier evidence indicated that he was not. Tyson's testimony is now concluded without a clear winner either way. I'm Jeff Block, CNN, Indianapolis.
Investigators in Evansville, Indiana have confirmed that they have found the cockpit voice recorder amid the wreckage of a military plane. Officials say they found the device yesterday, but it was so badly burned it took a while to confirm it. The recorder is being sent to Washington for analysis. Officials hope it will shed some light on why that C-130 transport plane crashed on Thursday, killing 16 people. President Bush has authorized the CIA to go after Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein. That's according to several sources. One of them, the Los Angeles Times, reports the president has set aside $30 million for covert action to weaken or topple Mr. Hussein. Hussein's continued leadership in Iraq is an irritant to Mr. Bush's re-election campaign.
Well, I've said I'd like to see him out of there. I just leave it right there. But don't believe all these reports you're reading. I just don't want to get into commenting on intelligence matters.
CIA Director Robert Gates is now in the Middle East holding talks with regional intelligence leaders. The 16th Winter Olympic Games have begun in Albertville, France. On a steep mountain road en route to the opening ceremonies, the brakes failed on the armored vehicle carrying Vice President Dan Quayle and his wife, but the Secret Service driver managed to stop the vehicle without incident. The Quayles visited American athletes before the opening ceremonies. The 181-member U.S. team is the largest delegation at the Winter Olympics. Today is the last day people in New Hampshire can register to vote in that state's February the 18th primary. Clerks in New Hampshire's major cities say they've been swamped with applications. A CNN USA Today Gallup poll is watching the progress of the candidates. Republicans were asked if they had to vote today which candidate they would support. 64% say President George Bush and 31% chose Patrick Buchanan. On the Democratic side, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton leads with 34%. Former Massachusetts Senator Paul Tsongas is next with 26%, and Senator Bob Kerrey of Nebraska, 13%. Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa and former California Governor Jerry Brown follow with 8% each. 11% say they are undecided. Polling was done over the last 3 days. Let's look at our top stories. Health Week coming up.
At GMC Truck, our only business is trucks, and has been for over 80 years. A dedication to truck strengths and values to keep in mind. Because when you need to haul something, tow something, carry precious cargo, find new trails, or simply ride high and proud, there's nothing quite as strong as a truck. GMC Truck, the strength of experience.
The glorious freshness of mint. Nobody knows it better than Polidin. That's why there's a splash of mint in every Polidin tablet. to leave your dentures feeling gloriously clean and fresh. Get Super Strength Polident with a splash of mint.
You scum! I never want to see you again. I hate soap scum like this, so I use X14 Soap Scum Remover. It's made to get rid of disgusting soap scum. So try X14 Soap Scum Remover.
I didn't want to be the first, but when I heard how many other guys had already tried Rogaine, I did too. Now I have only one regret. I just wish I'd tried Rogaine sooner.
For more information about Rogaine with minoxidil, see your doctor or call this number. If you want to get the complete story about Rogaine with minoxidil, what it does and how it does it, see your doctor or call 1-800-234-8364.
Upjohn Information Center.
That's 1-800-234-8364.
City streets under siege. Young killers. Young victims. Why have so many of America's children become violent? Join Jesse Jackson for both sides of this issue. Tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern on CNN.
Stay there. Here's Andrew Holtz with Health Week.
Hey, Bobby.
President Bush toured a hospital in Cleveland, Ohio before describing his plan to expand private health insurance coverage by subsidizing premiums. The plan would offer tax credits and insurance vouchers to low-income Americans of $1,250 for one person and up to $3,750 for a family. People with more income but no coverage at work would get some tax deductions if they bought their own insurance. Over 5 years, the president's plan may cost $100 billion. President Bush's health care proposal brings swift response from those who provide health care. That story is coming right up.
CNN Health Week.
The president says he would pay for more health insurance by limiting the growth of Medicare and Medicaid payments. But healthcare providers say they are already losing money on patients in those programs. Jeff Levine reports some patients are being turned away.
A suburban Atlanta nursing home is making a tough choice. It's kicking out 62 patients whose sole insurance is Medicaid, the federal state program to cover the poor. The deluxe Knollwood Terrace facility has been home for Ginger Hall's mother for a year, but now Hall is searching for a new nursing home.
And we've just all cried together because we feel like we're in a system that has lost its caring for people.
The administrator says his decision was based on harsh economic reality, a drop in the daily Medicaid reimbursement rate from $98 to $62.
We had two choices. We could either reduce our staffing or other areas in order to meet this reduction of 30%, or we would withdraw from the Medicaid program.
Medicaid is projected to grow to an $84 billion program in fiscal '93. And in announcing his health reform plan to help the nation's 30 million plus uninsured, the president singled it out.
This year alone, let me repeat that, Medicaid costs will increase by 38%.
Mr. Bush hopes to save enough money by slowing Medicaid growth and by increasing the cost of Medicare to the wealthy to underwrite a big chunk of his $100 billion plan.
There will be no cuts in the Medicare or the Medicaid program. What we envision are cost savings.
The administration envisions a streamlined health care system with less paper to push and a greater emphasis on prevention. But the powerful American Medical Association expressed reservations over how well the president's prescription would work.
I think what the president proposes is the increased use of what he's calling coordinated care. We're not quite sure what he means by coordinated care. You know, is it new wine in old bottles, and does it just mean managed care?
And some analysts fear the proposed insurance subsidy of about $300 a month would be inadequate to purchase meaningful coverage. If enacted, the president's health plan could wind up covering an estimated 90 million Americans. But critics charge that's not a cure, just cosmetic surgery.
The tropical neem tree is being called a wonder plant. Researchers call for expanded studies of extracts from the neem that may ease pain, fight skin and tooth disease, perhaps even lead the way to new contraceptives. Other researchers trek into deserts, seeking inspiration for new drugs. In the desert, there are hidden riches. They draw Barbara Timmerman on a search that leads between cactus spines. The riches are uncatalogued chemicals in plants, the results of millions of years of evolution, which may yield drugs to fight cancers or infections or AIDS.
The chemistry of many desert plants is unique. Desert plants produce chemicals that a synthetic chemist, an organic chemist, will never dream of making.
This plant is very interesting because it has many adaptations to stress.
The cactus symbolizes the desert.
If you look at this desert, you'll find a mixture of plants with spines.
Though their thorns are sharp physical defenses, the chemicals inside are, in general, mild.
But if we look at other plants, for example, this little bush around us, which does not have spines, it's very slender, very pretty looking, but it's very mean chemically. It has a very potent chemistry.
Across the quiet desert floor, each plant is fighting for survival.
So if you look at this beautiful landscape in this area, there is a very strong chemical warfare going on.
In the laboratory, researchers sift for clues to new drugs by refining the raw plants into chemical extracts.
And this very crude extract may contain a couple of hundreds of natural products.
The extracts, or fractions as they're called, are tested to see if they contain potential drugs.
Let's say anti-tumor activity or antiviral, and if a fraction comes active, then we concentrate on the activity, on the chemistry of that fraction.
The end product is a pure chemical, a crude drug, which may be tested against disease or altered to enhance its potential. The researchers are never quite sure what they'll find.
I think our work is always very full of surprises. A lot of hard work, very long work, but at the end we get very good surprises, especially working with desert plants.
No one can say whether a vital chemical will be found in this particular plant or the next one. But researchers have found interesting chemicals and believe there are more to be found somewhere in the uncharted richness of the desert. Ahead on Health Week, the prescription police.
And we worry about the smaller town where it's a good old boy system and people find out things that really aren't their business.